Greetings, brothers and sisters, within the Kingdom of England, Empire of Albion. As I, your brother Deonde Belmont from the illustrious noble house of Belmont, as well Archbishop of the Third Temple English Church of England. And like we say here, always, it's a beautiful time to be alive. Have to give honors to the Creator, to our foremothers, forefathers, to our saints, martyrs who have come and gone, to our President King, Clifford Jefferson from Royal House of Plantagenet, our Queen, Lisa Jordan from the Royal House of Galveston, to the members of the Third Temple English Church, to the officers, trustees, as well to the loyal people within the realm, those who are doing righteous deeds and good acts of kindness, as well as those who are still trying to find their way home. Today is December 29th, 2974 of the Berber calendar, which is equivalent to the 2024 Gregorian calendar. Now, today's lesson, I'm going to be talking about Thomas William Shore regarding the origin of the Anglo-Saxon race. I know I've done this lesson a few times, one at the Third Temple English Church, and then I've done a couple snippets, and I noticed lately that it still seems to be people who don't want to accept this information for what it is because they have some type of emotional connection, which I understand. We understand. But you also have to accept that this is our inheritance, and it was taken away from us for whatever reason. I would say because of family feuding, which we can verify took place. And eventually we was going to have to start learning how to love each other once again. Go back to the drawing board, which we call the original position, and start from scratch. And I don't mean start from scratch of like having nothing. I mean start from scratch as picking up where we left off at and go back to the original position with the understanding of our true conscious regarding who we are nationally, politically, as well ethnically. The origin of the stars, we don't need to talk about that. That's not the point right now, because I know many of you is going to try to tie yourself to those beliefs. That is not conducive right now to moving us forward. But we're going to go ahead and focus on who we are in this present day and time, especially if I'm letting you know, or the world know, that we are Anglo-Saxon Berbers, aka Englishmen and women from the territory that you call the Kingdom of England, Great Britain, and now known on the British American colonies, aka the United States of America. So that's what it's known today, but it's still English crown soil. Alright? And it's important for those who are underneath that ancestry to know who they are. So we're going to utilize the words from Mr. Thomas William Shore, who done a marvelous job in his research to be able to have it compiled in this instrument, which we would like to call his book, that was released posthumously. And now we're having the ability to be able to take a look at it even more to see what he had left, what gems, to cooperate with our claim regarding who we are. So let's go ahead and get started. It says, Thomas William Shore, sometimes given as William Thomas Shore, was an English geologist antiquarian, born April 5th, 1840, passed January 15, 1905. It says his life, he was born at Wantage. He was the son of a William Shore, who was an architect by his wife, Susanna Carter. Brought up in Wantage, he became organizing secretary to the East Lincolnshire Union of Institutions at Burnley. In 1867, he was sent with others by the Science and Art Department to the Paris exhibition to report on scientific and technical education and gave evidence on the subject before a select committee of the House of Commons in 1868. Pause. So as you can see, Mr. Thomas William Shore had a pretty good background regarding his accolades, and for him to have the ability to present one of his scientific findings to the House of Commons in 1868 is incredible. Let's continue. In 1873, Shore was appointed secretary to the Hartley Institution at Southampton and curator of the museum, and later became executive officer of the institution. In 1882, he was secretary of the geological section of the Southampton meeting of the British Association. He was elected fellow of the Geological Society on April 3, 1878. Both as geologist and antiquary, he was considered an authority on Hampshire. Pause. So, based off of his credentials, he was considered an antiquarian. An antiquarian is someone who deals with ancient history and things prior to current and the Middle Age. So we're going to say like medieval time and before. And then him being given the authority of Hampshire. So based off of his knowledge, they gave him this position. Alright, so this is not something that we should take lightly, brothers and sisters, especially when I go ahead and read the book that he wrote in regarding the origin of the Anglo-Saxon race, because if he's already seen in this position at such an early age, just imagine why they allowed him to go in further roles, especially when it came down to him creating this book. Alright, so it says in 1896, Shore moved to London and founded the Belmont Antiquarian Society. He died suddenly at his residence. Why suddenly? We'd definitely like to know. At 157 Bedford Hill, Belmont, on January 15, 1905, and was buried at the cemetery of St. Mary Extra Woolston, Southampton. Alright, so our condolences for Mr. William Shore passing at such a sudden time, especially not knowing why it happened, but his work will not be gone unnoticed. It will be remembered and cherished. Works Shore published: Guide to Southampton and Neighborhood, 1882. Letterpress description of vestiges of Old Southampton by Frank McFadden, 1891. A History of Hampshire, including the Isle of Wight, Popular County Histories, 1892. And it said at his death he was engaged, and I think this had to be something foul play at this point. But it said at his death he was engaged on Origin of the Anglo-Saxon Race, which was edited posthumously by his sons. So that means that his sons, after he died suddenly, posthumously, which means after he died, edited his book, and then it was released. But the book was released in 1906. He passed 1896. So 10 years later, the book was released after they did some editing to it. Alright, so there definitely have to be something in there that we got to take under consideration, that it can't be a mere coincidence. Alright, and it says Shore was the founder of the Hampshire Field Club and Archaeological Society and remained its honorary secretary until his death. He contributed papers to the Society's transactions, including ancient Hampshire forests, the clays of Hampshire and their economic uses, and Hampshire Valley and waterways. The Shore Memorial, undertaken by the Society, contains his contributions to the Society and other papers. Shortly after 1901, he became short honorary secretary of the London and Middlesex Archaeological Society and contributed to its transactions a series of papers on Anglo-Saxon London and Middlesex. And then it has just a little information on his family. January 14, 1861, Shore married Amelia Lewis of Gloucester, who died on May 31st, 1891. They had two sons, William Shore, MD, Dean of the Medical School of St. Bartholomew's Hospital, and Lewis Airy Shore, lecturer on physiology at Cambridge, and three daughters. So, for such a prestigious man, it's weird that there's not more information on him. All right, especially the fact that he spoke in front of the House of Commons. Well, I was able to get another page from the Hampshire Field Club and Archaeological Society, and it's not too bad in regard to the information that's on here. Um, just read it. It says the files listed below relate to some of the papers relating to Hampshire published by T.W. Shore, which was collected into the volume for the members. This memorial volume was completed in 1911. Where known, the source of the articles listed, the next two paragraphs are taken from the first article by Reverend G.W. Means, which gives a fuller picture of the life and originator of the HFC&AS, which is the Hansfield Club Archaeological Society. And it says, on the death of Mr. Thomas William Shore, a wish was widely expressed that a fitting appreciation of his long and valuable services to the Hansfield Club and Archaeological Society should be shown by the publication in the permanent form of some of the papers which he read to the members of their meetings. These appeared in the columns of local newspapers. The issue of the present volume will, it is hoped, serve as a slight memorial of Mr. Shore's labors for the spread of antiquarian knowledge in Hampshire. The work of selection was committed to the present writer, who was editor of the Hansfield Club papers, for many years associated with Mr. Shore and the work for the society. For the materials of this prefatory memoir, he is greatly indebted to the notices which appeared at the time of Mr. Shore's death in the communications of the private fields. And it was association with the Hampshire Field Club and Archaeological Society which made Mr. Shore's name widely known as the as an authority of high repute on geological and antiquarian subjects. You hear this? So he was a well-known authority when it came down to his research, especially when it came down to ancient antiquities. It says he was the originator of the society, for as appears for the minute book on March 20th, 1885. Mr. Shore called together the Reverend G. Woodhouse, Vicar of Ropley, the Reverend W. L. Iyer, Rector of Shoreton, and Mr. W. Whitaker, FRS of the Geological Survey, and by these the Hansfield Club was founded. Mr. Shore became one of the honorary secretaries, having as his colleague Mr. Ernest Westlake of Fordbridge. In 1887, Mr. William Dale undertook the duties of Honorable General Secretary and became the faithful ally of Mr. Shore, who, as the honorary organizing secretary, now gave his attention to the planning of the summer meetings, and in this matter did inestimable service. Not only did he make the preliminary arrangements, but gave much time to the preparation of papers. He could always be relied on to have something that was interesting and useful to say about the places visited and things to be seen. Alright, so once again, Mr. Thomas William Shore, and here's an image of him. It's the only image I was able to find of him. And then to the left, some of the information in regards to the source article. I think some of the stuff that he wrote, but I'm not sure. You can go and click that on your own time. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at the wonderful origin of the Anglo-Saxon race, a study of the settlement of England and the tribal origin of the Old English people, by Thomas William Shore, 1840 to 1905, publication date 1906, in London. Topics: Anglo-Saxon ethnology, Great Britain. Right. So let's go ahead and get in here. And brothers and sisters, don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit that like button. Hit those like buttons, that's the way we get this information out there. We get to break through the algorithm. And so for those of you who need to hear this information, can hear it and see it for yourself, because you do have a right to know who you are where you come from, because you have an inheritance underneath there. And that's the only way we can bring balance back. Because once you be able to know who you are, you can practice the culture of your people, the religion. You'll know your agriculture practices. You'll know what is yours. You'll know how to conduct yourself out here. And many of you will realize, though we are all related, or many of us are related. So the choice is yours. All right. All right. Origin of the Anglo-Saxon race. Hopefully everyone can see this. Sometimes it's hard to see. Alright, so let's go ahead and read the preface. So I know my audience, many of you probably can't see well, so I'm taking that in consideration. Alright, the preface. It says, this book, which the outcome of many years of close research and careful study, was practically complete at the time of the author's death, and he had intended its early publication. Some portions of the manuscript had been revised for printing. Some of the chapters have received numerous additions and alterations in arrangement even until within a few days of his death, and others still needed their final revision. Alright. I hope you brothers and sisters understand the impact and significance of what's been said so far, because the fact that he died so suddenly and this book was technically already finished before he passed away. Like, there seems to be some form of foul play. But I'm not going to go into conspiracies or speculation based off of that without further evidence. Alright, so it says, from time to time, the portions of subject matter of this work had formed a text for papers read before various archaeological societies, notably the series of 3 papers on Anglo-Saxon London and its neighborhood, published by the London and Middlesex Archaeological Society. The editor's task has been that of revising and editing the manuscript and seeing their work through the press. The order of the chapters and the general scope and plan of the book are as the author left them. In discharging their task, the editors have made as few alterations as possible, and only such as they felt sure the author would have himself carried out. But the work necessarily suffers from the lack of that final revision, which the author alone could have given it. Every endeavor has been made to see that the information is as exact as possible, and most of the references have been verified. The index place names in the general index have been made by Blanche Shore, the author's daughter. Alright, and then you have T.W. Shore, M.D., L.E. Shore, M.D., April 1906. So once again, they said that they try to keep it as untouched as much as possible, and all of the information on here, references have been verified. So, and it took many years for him to do this work, so don't take this information lightly. It's not like it was just a regular Joe Schmo put it together. This was someone who had credentials that traces back to foundation of societies to deal with antiquarians as well as geology today, based off of him. Alright, so let's continue. The table of contents. And we're not going to go through all of these chapters. We're going to go specifically to one specific chapter, because the book is talking about the origin of the Anglo-Saxon race, right? So the best chapter, in my opinion, would be what? Go to who their forefathers were. All of the chapters here you have, we're going to go to chapter 7. Our Darker Forefathers, which is on page 103. Highly recommend you to get the book. You can download it at archive.org, or you can purchase it. I recommend purchasing it. Definitely recommend purchasing it. All Alright, so let's get to page 103. And we're not going to read everything in here. Alright, here we go, page 103. Alright, Darker Forefathers. Let's go ahead and zoom in. Alright, our Darker Forefathers. And it says, one of the facts concerning the color of the hair and eyes of the people in different counties of England at the present time, brought to light by scientific observations, is that there is a higher percentage of people of a mixed brown type living in Herefordshire, Buckinghamshire, Wiltshire, and Dorset, and then in the most other counties. Except those in Cornwall and on the old Celtic borders, the inhabitants of these counties are the darkest. So he's telling you the complexion of these people. They're brown, or what they call brunette, in England, but on the old Celtic borders, which the Celti, they was known as Celti Iberians or Celti Britons or whatever. These folks were the darkest. Alright, so it says this is usually explained on the supposition that in the process of the Saxon settlement, a British population was allowed to remain in these parts of England, which in the course of centuries became mixed with the inhabitants of Anglo-Saxon descent, and consequently, the present population is more marked than those of a pure descent by brown, hazel, or black eyes with brown, chestnut, dark brown, or black hair. The counties of Hereford and Buckingham have people as dark as Wales. All investigations go to show that this brunette outcrop is a reality. They're telling you the complexion of these people. Bedeau found that an area in which there is a larger percentage of brown people in England extends from the River Leah to the Warwickshire Avon. So this is giving you an idea of how many people that's there so far that they're telling you is brown. He says from the River Leah to the Warwickshire Avon. And then he's already telling you that the people on the older Celtic borders are the darkest, which is more brown folks. So this is a nice range of people, that they're telling you that's populating this area who all are technically brown. All right, so it says, in dealing with the circumstances of the settlement, these ethnological facts must receive consideration. The survival, sorry about that. Survival of a British population is a possible explanation, and one which appears to be the most natural. As there are some difficulties in this conclusion, the question arises, is there any other way in which the origin of these mixed brown people, they're talking about Anglo-Saxon and Britons or British people or whatever you want to call them, they're still the same folks and come down to complexion, but they're mixed. So it says mixed brown people surrounded by others of a somewhat fairer complexion. That means like light-skinned folks. Like that's what people today who will call like Alicia Keys, what's the other sister? Raven Simone's. You kind of get a gist. The light-skinned sisters or brothers within the community. Those would be considered what they'll call of a fairer complexion, which would be of a lighter complexion. Can be explained. An alternative explanation is that these people of a darker race may have come with the Angles, Saxons, or Danes and have settled largely in these parts of the country. So they're telling you that these darker complexion people were Angles, Saxons, and Danes. There is a circumstantial evidence that people of a brown or dark complexion did come into England during the time of both the Saxon and the Danish settlements, and this may now be summarized. First, we have the evidence that Wends were among the settlers either during the early period or later in alliance with the Danes. The Wends, specifically so called by the Germans, included some tribes much darker than the Saxons and Angles, as the remnant of the race still called Wends living on the border of Saxony and Prussia at the present time shows. They are the darkest people in northern Germany, according to the official census. From 26 to 29% of the children of the Wendish district of Lusatia, south of Dresden, were shown by this census to be brunettes, notwithstanding the admixture of race with the much fairer people of the Teutonic descent, which has been going on along this borderland since the dawn of history. You hear this? All the Slav nations are not dark. Some are as fair as the Scandinavians, while others, such as the Wends and the Czechs in Bohemia, are dark. The Wendish place names in the Buckinghamshire and on its borders help to show that some people of this race probably settled in that county. Huntingdon tells us that during the later Saxon period, they formed part of the Scandinavian host. They were in alliance with Norwegians, Danes, Swedes, Goths, Frisians, or in any case, people of these races were acting together in the Danish expeditions against England. Pause. So they're letting you know all of these folks who came in, they came into these, what you can call a conquest or invasion of England, they were brown. And then all of the folks who were originally there in England, they were brown. So they're coming in and technically mixing up, but they're all the same folks, just some were darker than others. Let's continue. It says it is likely apologize about that. Okay, so it says it is likely therefore that when the permanent settlements formed adjoining townships will be occupied by this alliance. This consideration helps us to identify Windlesbury in Herefordshire, Wendover and its neighborhood in Buckinghamshire, the Anglo-Saxon Windofra, and Windsor, anciently Windsor, close to the southern border of that county, were probably named after settlers who were Wends. A British people were left, as suggested, like Eddie between the main lines of the Anglo-Saxon advance east and west of these counties. Would it not be very surprising that the advancing Saxons could make no use of the existing Roman roads of the Watling Street, Inknield Street, the Aikman Street, which passed through parts of these shires, while the Ermine Street also went through Herefordshire? To suppose that invaders and subsequent settlers would have forsaken the excellent roads which the Romans had made and in their advance would have passed through the more difficult country east and west of them, thus leaving undisturbed the British population, is most unlikely. Secondly, these counties are not specially marked by the survival of Celtic place names, nor by a dialect containing words of Celtic origin. In Anglo-Saxon times, there was, however, a place named Wallabrock in Buckinghamshire. Thirdly, it should be remembered that the western border of Buckinghamshire was at one time the western frontier of the Danelaw, which comprised 15 counties known as Fiftonshire until after the Norman conquest, and that the Danish law survived for more than a century after the conquest east of the frontier. This fact points to a population largely Scandian. There is, in addition, evidence that points to Norwegians of a brunette appearance, so they're telling you the Norwegians are brown. Appearance is another source, hence brown complexioned people may have come into England. On the southeast coast of Norway, and here they're on the coast far north, a population is met with which differs from the usual Norwegian type, and this has been referred by anthropologists to a very ancient settlement there of the prehistoric brown race that survives in the highlands of Central Europe and is known as the brown alpine race. This race is believed to have extended before the dawn of history much further northward in Germany. The brown people of Norway are well seen in Jordan, where Arbo found that the blonde and the really dark-haired peoples about equally represented it. The Norwegian brunettes differ from the typical blondes of that country in two other particulars. First, they are broad-headed, while the blondes, which comprise the bulk of the nation, are long-headed. And not only are the broader-headed people of these coast districts darker as a whole, but in them, the broad-headed individuals tend to be darker than the other type, as Arbo has clearly shown. Secondly, the broadest-headed people of these localities in Norway incline to shortness of stature below that of the typical Norwegian. From Huntington's statement concerning Vandals as Danish allies and these considerations, there appears to be evidence to account for the greater percentage of brunettes, or the greater tendency to the brunette type that prevails in Hertfordshire and Buckinghamshire over the adjoining counties, without necessarily concluding that such an ethnological phenomenon can only have been caused by a remnant of the British population. It is indeed an unlikely district for Celtic people to have been left in large numbers. On the contrary, view of its excellent communications, it is a country where the conquest by the early settlers might be expected to have been most thorough. Whether the Hertfordshire and Buckinghamshire brunettes are partly due to the settlements of Wends and Norwegians of the dark type, as now suggested, or to some other cause, the British theory as a complete explanation, is in view of the facts appears improbable. The chief lines of the Anglo-Saxon advance during the early settlement were the navigable rivers and the Roman roads. The Scandian advances into the country during their conquest and later settlements have been along the same lines of communication. On one occasion, at least, we read of the Danish host presumably using the Icknield way on the march from East Anglia into Dorset. This consideration of the probable origin of the great proportion of brunettes in two of the South Midland counties of England leads us to that color names as surnames. Pay attention, because after this, I'm going to have to show you, brothers and sisters, that the surnames that many of you have denotes to your complexion, and your surname is a free name, which is an inheritance, which means that you derived it from your predecessor, from the original grantor grantee. The grantor was the king. The grantee is your forebearer, whether that's your forefather or foremother. But I don't think women weren't only receive a coat of arms or crest based off of marriage into the family or from the house they come from, and then they bore the coat of arms or crest, as you would like to call it. But so far, hope you brothers and sisters are liking what's being shown and displayed, because I'm probably going to have to do this in multiple parts, just so therefore I can keep the videos short, and therefore you can be able to digest the information that's been shown so far. And so I'm going to go ahead and end up wrapping it up after I read the rest of this page. But it says, this consideration, once again, of the probable origin of the great proportion of brunettes, that's brown, in two of the South Midland counties of England leads us to that of color names as surnames and place names, which may probably have been derived from their original settlers. For example, there is the common name Brown. This has been derived from the Anglo-Saxon brun, signifying brown. It is not reasonable to doubt that when our forefathers called a man brun or brown, they gave him this name as a descriptive of his brown complexion. The probability that the brunettes were common is supported by the frequent references to the person's name Brun in Anglo-Saxon literature. Brun was a name not confined to England in the Anglo-Saxon and later periods. On the contrary, we find that it was a common name in ancient Germany. The typical place name Brunningerfield occurs in a charter of Ethelstan, dated AD 980, and Loki Kui Brunningerfield Dictator Brunnensham Hats is mentioned in the charter of Edward the Elder about AD 900. You know what? Let's go to one more page. Brunsford is another suggestive name. Brumman is mentioned as a personal name in Anglo-Saxon records of the 11th century, and examples of the name Brunningham are somewhat numerous in documents of the same period. At the present time, old place names of which the word Braun forms the chief part, such as Braunschweig or Brunswick, are common in Germany. The custom of calling people by color names from their personal appearance or place after them was clearly not peculiar to our own country. You hear this? He's talking about England, because he's saying that they were calling people by their color names back in Germany. All right, so like for instance, how we call folks today in America, sometimes you may call them like, say, "What up, black?" Or he like say, "Oh," and all of this are color names, and it could be tied to who? To your complexion. Now we don't call each other like, say, "What up, brown?" That's just we don't say that. We say bro now, but bro, that's just a different way of we calling each other brothers. All right, but we were calling each other color names, like they say, not only in England, but they was doing this in Germany, and they're letting you know that the original Germans were also brown people. All these folks that they say we trace back to what they call the brown alpine race. Alp, I would like to say, is another way to say all. All is another way that we can say those who's known as quote unquote white, but they're not talking about white as a so-called skin complexion. They're talking about as the so-called pure race, pure ones, and those pure ones was actually known as brown complexion people, aka the dark skinned so-called folks that you will call Negroes today. And during this time in history, as we can see, Thomas William Shore had done great research to be able to verify that these are who these people are. Which today we're telling you we are those Anglo-Saxon Berbers, those people who can be traced back to those so-called brown Alpine race. All right, and let me just go ahead and finish this last part up on this page. Excuse me, the rest of this page, and then we'll go ahead and get set up for part two. So it says, once again, says Brunsman is mentioned as a personal name in Anglo-Saxon records of the 11th century, and examples of the name Brunning are somewhat numerous in documents of the same period. At the present time, old place names of which the word Braun forms the chief part, such as Braunschweig or Brunswick, are common in Germany. The custom of calling people by color names from their personal appearance or places after them was clearly not peculiar to our own country. It is probable that the name Brunswick was derived from the brown complexion of its original inhabitants. The map published by Ripley, based on an official ethnological survey of Germany, shows that parts of the country near Brunswick have a higher percentage of brunettes than the districts further north. Bedeau also made observations on the number of Brunswick peasantry and records some remarkable facts relating to the proportion of brunettes among those who came under his observation. In view of this, and the evidence relating to the use of the Anglo-Saxon word Brun in English place names, we are not, I think, justified in deciding that all English names, which would begin with Brun, modernized into Burn, so Brun equates to burn. In many cases, by the well-known shifting of the R sound, have derived from Brun a bourne or stream, rather than from Brun, brown. Such names as Brunningerfield and Brunsham point to the opposite conclusion, that Brun and such names refer to people, probably so named from their complexions. So Brun equates once again to brown. If a large proportion of the settlers in the counties of Buckingham and Hereford were of a brown complexion, it is clear that they would have been less likely to have been called Brun or brown. Like I said, if a large proportion of the settlers in the counties of Buckingham and Hereford were for brown complexion, it is clear that they would have been less likely to have been called brun or brown by their neighbors than brunettes would in other counties, where such a complexion may have been rarer and consequently more likely to have attracted the notice of the people around them. It is not probable that people who were originally designated by the color names brown, black, gray, or the like gave themselves these names. They most likely received them from others. Pause. So once again, other people were calling us this. Once we want to identify ourselves as our so-called complexion, but the cities and the towns or the surnames identified who we were. It gave a general indication of who the people were based off of the name itself. So like he said, Brunningham or Warwickshire, These names denote to letting you know the people there were brown. Same way as the surname, like Brun, which means brown, denotes to the people who carry or bore that name complexion, but that didn't mean that the people themselves identified as themselves being brown, black, or gray. People outside call them that. Like, for instance, today, how you got people want to call or identify all melanated people as that's a black man or that's a brown man. We don't go around calling ourselves those terms. I don't identify my brother and sister as a black or a brown person. I identify them based off of the family they come from. And then we know historically we identify people not only either from the family they descend from, but what nation you come from. So you have to see what's taking place, what was going on back then, is technically still going on now. And then it says, they most likely once again received this from others. The evidence concerning brown people in England during the Anglo-Saxon period, which can be derived from the place name Brun, is supplemented by that supplied in at least some of the old place names, beginning with Dun and Dunning. Dun is the old English word denoting a color partaking of brown and black, and where it occurs at the beginning of words in such a combination at Dunningland. It is possible that it refers to the brown people or their children, rather than to the Anglo-Celtic word Dun, a hill or fortified place. So once again, brothers and sisters, they're letting you know, or what Brother Thomas William Shore has done in his research is giving you an indication regarding the complexion of the original people in the territory that you do not only call the British Isles, but what you even call Europe, in case Germany, Norway, Sweden, etc. He's letting you know that these people originally were brown folks. Now, I'm not saying all of them were, but letting you know that those folks who were in these places, they were brown folks, and they did have a nationality, and they did come from a family who tied themselves to this nation or to these kingdoms that was here, and not trying to you just place them into the place we would call Africa today. All right. These folks, which we would call today is modern Europe, not we wouldn't call them modern Europeans, but in the sense of this understanding what we're reading from, these people are in Europe. All right, these are brown people in Europe. Let's continue. So it says, as regards the ancient brown race or races of North Europe, there can be no doubt of their existence in the southeast of Norway and in the east of Friesland. There can be no doubt about the important influence which the old Wendish race has had in the northeastern parts of Germany in transmitting to their descendants a more brunette complexion than prevails among the people of Hanover, Holstein, and Westphalia of more pure Teutonic descent. We cannot reasonably doubt that in view of such a survival of brown people as we find at the present time in the provinces of North Holland, Drenthe, and Overijssel, hope I said that right, which formed the hinterland of the ancient Frisian country, numerous brunettes must have come into England among the Frisians. It would be as unreasonable to doubt this as it would, it would be as unreasonable to doubt this as it would to think that during the Norwegian immigration into England, all the brown people of Norway were precluded from, I was going to do one last page, but it goes over, from leaving their country because they were brunettes, or that there were Wends who undoubtedly settled in England in considerable numbers, or none of them of a brunette type. The survival of some people with broad heads of a brown type in parts of Drenthe, Guenderland, and Overijssel appears unmistakable. They present a remarkable contrast in appearance to their Frisian neighbors, who are of a different complexion in regard to their hair and skin, and are especially characterized as long-headed. It was in Guenderland that ancient Thiel was situated, and the men of Thiel and those of Brun were apparently recognized as different people from the real Frisians, for in the later Anglo-Saxon laws relating to the sojourn of strangers within the city of London, it is stated that the men of the emperor may lodge within the city wherever they please, except those of Thistle and of Brun. The evidence concerning the origin of the broad-headed Slavonic nations connects them with the broad-headed and still older Alpine race of the Central Europe. The most generally accepted theory among anthropologists as to the physical relationship of the Slavs is that they were always, as the majority of them are today, of the same stock as the broad-headed Alpine race. This old race has sometimes been called the Celtic, but it's perhaps more accurate to say that it's very ancient stock from which the old Celtic race of the British Bronze Age was an offshoot. This curious circumstance consequently comes before us in considering the Anglo-Saxon settlement of England. If the brunette character of the people of any part of England at the present time is due to a survival of the race characters of the Celts of the British Bronze Age, and it is this same character has been caused partly by people of a darker complexion and broad heads settling as immigrants among the fair-haired and long-headed Teutons in other parts of England. This racial character in both cases can be traced along different lines to the same distant source. Pay attention, brothers and sisters. This consideration of the evidence that the people of brunette complexions, aka brown complexion, were among the Anglo-Saxon settlers in England leads us to that of the people of a still darker hue, the dark, black, or brown settlers. Probably there must have been some of these among the Anglo-Saxons, for we meet with the personal names Blackman, Blackman, Blakeman, Blackaman, Blacksunu, Blaka, and Blanchman in various documents of those period. Blaka was an ealdorman of Lindsey who was converted by Paulinus. Blackman was the son of Ilric or Edric, a descendant of Ida, ancestor of Ildrid, king of Bernicia, and so on. The same kind of evidence is met among the oldest place names. Blackmanenburg is mentioned in the Anglo-Saxon charter. Blanchmanstone was the name of a place in Dorset, and Blanchmanstone was of a place in Kent. Blackshill and Blackenhill are Domesday names of places in Somerset, and Blackengally occurs in the Domesday record of Surrey. The name Blatchman occurs in the Hertfordshire survey in Blatchin and Lincoln. Among the earliest names of the same kind in the charters, we find Blackenden in Hants and Blackendon in Dorset. The places called Blackmanstone in Dorset and Blackmanstone and Kent were more quite close to the coast. The circumstances which points to the settlers having come to these places by water rather than to a survival of black people of the old Celtic race having been left in them. So, once again, they're telling you, based off of the research of Thomas William Shore, that not only was the old Celtic race dark-skinned people, but those who came in, aka the Anglo-Saxon race, they were brown or dark-skinned people as well. So I'm supposed to do all of that. And then let's just go ahead and finish this one out real quick. Let's go to Cheddar Man. I thought I was going to go on ahead and try to do part 2, but I'm going to try to finish this right now in just one part because we've already spoken on this. This is not new information. It's already old. It's been out for years. It's just that we living in a time there's so much content that's been created that this information gets buried. So as messengers and advocate of those who are the descendants, which I am, as well as those within the Third Temple English Church of England, it is our obligation to duty to continue to keep speaking on it. Like they say, repetition is the father of learning. So we have to teach you to know who you truly are, especially if you know this is who you are. Because everyone not only don't want to be who they are, but everyone don't have the ability to sit here and understand who they are without having some type of guide. And that's what we're here for. Alright, to guide you back home, the crossroads towards salvation, which is the true English church where you're supposed to get the knowledge that you're supposed to be having today to save you as English heirs and successors. Alright, so it says Cheddar Man, and this is coming from the Natural History Museum in the UK. Alright, so it says Cheddar Man, Mesolithic Britain's blue-eyed boy. Ancient DNA from Cheddar Man has helped museum scientists paint a portrait of one of the oldest modern humans in Britain. It says if you watch the Channel 4 documentary The First Brit Secrets of 10,000-Year-Old Man or read about the museum's research to Cheddar Man, you may have some further questions you'd like answered. Here are researchers' response to some of the most popular queries they received. It says, how can DNA survive 10,000 years? It says DNA can survive in bones and teeth for extraordinary lengths of time given the right environmental conditions. The oldest ancient DNA extracted to date is probably that from a horse bone which was preserved in the Canadian permafrost for over 550,000 years. DNA survives less well in bones from temperate environments, but cave environments seem to provide some protection. Ancient DNA has been successfully extracted and analyzed from 35,000-year-old human remains from Europe. The good preservation of the DNA we retrieved from Cheddar Man is unusual, but not unexpected. It says, how do you know his skin color? It says, we were able to extract enough information from Cheddar Man's DNA to run it through a forensic tool that predicts differences in the level of skin pigmentation in modern world populations. The results indicated that Cheddar Man's skin pigmentation was most likely in one of the two most highly pigmented of 5 categories: dark or dark to black, and definitely not in the lightest categories. You hear that? So it says dark or dark to black, and definitely not in the lightest categories. That's Cheddar Man, who was found in Britain. 10,000-year-old DNA. It says, is this a surprising find? It says, no, not really. Previous studies of DNA from Mesolithic individuals recovered from Spain, Luxembourg, and Hungary identified that they also lacked the versions of genes associated with reduced skin pigmentation and milder, light-skinned Europeans. We found that Cheddar Man belonged to the same population as these individuals. You hear this? Same way how we was reading from Thomas William Shore, was showing you that these folks are technically all the same folks, aka the brown alpine races, which will tell you are Berbers. They're all the same folks. 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica also qualifies what it is that we're saying, as well from what the DNA or the science is saying, as well from what Brother Thomas William Shore has spoken about. Only people who don't want to hear this are these new modern Eurocentrics who can't understand and believe that the heirs from these territories are actually doing the great work to remember who they truly are, so therefore we can start making the proper claim because of we have our king. Our king is the de jure king of England, not the de facto United Kingdom British monarchs over there, who's nothing more than puppet figureheads. They don't really have any say-so. They're just there for commemorative purposes only. Alright, so let's continue. And it says, however, we did predict how dark Cheddar Man's skin was by examining. Let me repeat, so I lost part of that. It says, we found that Cheddar Man belonged to the same population as these individuals, usually referred to as Western European Mesolithic hunter-gatherers. So in that context, his pigmentation is not unusual. However, we did predict how dark Cheddar Man's skin was by examining variation in a wider range of genes related to skin pigmentation. And it says, will these findings be published in a peer-reviewed paper? It says, we are preparing a related paper for submission, but this paper is not exclusively about Cheddar Man. As previous studies have already suggested that darker skin pigmentation was common in Western European Mesolithic hunter-gatherers. The results from Cheddar Man are not novel enough by themselves to form the basis of a scientific paper, but finding that he was typical of that population was novel, and when put in the context of subsequent migrations to Britain, his genome becomes a valuable piece of the British population history jigsaw. It says, this is what I wanted those of you to see who don't understand that there's a difference between those of us who came from so-called Europe and then those who so-called came from Africa. It says, is Cheddar Man actually an escaped slave or a tourist from Africa? It says, no. The bones of Cheddar Man have been radiocarbon dated twice, and on both occasions the results indicate that he died around 10,000 years ago. Are there any people with lighter skin pigmentation at this time? It says yes. Populations with the versions of the genes responsible for lighter pigmentation were living in parts of Scandinavia and Western Asia at around the time Cheddar Man was alive. But they're letting you know that the territory that Cheddar Man was at, all of us was dark skin, aka the territory which we'll call the British Isles, all dark skinned people. It says, how do Europeans develop paler skin? You can read the rest of that on your own, just for the sake of the time. How do we conclude that 10% of blah blah blah? Just read the rest of this, and here's all of their references. You can go ahead and read if those of you who don't want to believe it. But at this point in time, it is not about believing, it's about knowing. So you need to know. And I'm going to just finish this up with just a couple pictures. Here you go with the image of King Edward III from the Royal House of Plantagenet. King Edward III, as you can see. Order of the Garter over his plate. He's the King of England of 1327 to 1377. And this illuminated manuscript was done in 1430 to 1440. So, as you can see, like, allow me to go in. Nope, it won't let me go in. But you can see from the outside, it's good enough. Zoom on in. So as you can see, the complexion of King Edward III fits the complexion or the description of what they said the Anglo-Saxons should be, as well the complexion of Cheddar Man. Let me see if I can pull up a picture of Cheddar Man. It's supposed to be Cheddar Man, the first Brighton. Like they said, turns out he was dark skinned. Zoom out so you can see. Alright, that's Cheddar Man. Back to King Edward III. Once again, see, forked beard, like the Berbers, curly hair, what they call woolly, and brown complexion. It's actually, if you look close enough, it look like, yeah, like it says, what they'll call dun, but it's dark brown complexion. And let's see King George, excuse me, I don't know why I keep saying King George. King Edward III's son, Edward the Black Prince. Just like his father. See, I'm trying to see if they allow me to zoom in, but it moves over, so I can't use that. Alright, yep, so Edward the Black Prince, known as Edward of Woodstock. Born June 15, 1330. I think that birthday might be off because there's nowhere in the world that I had to relook that the year the birthday's up. But the goal is to look at this description. You see them seals from the Royal House of Plantagenet, crest of England. Once again, you see the complexion, same lineage, same house. This is his son. Just to give you an idea. And also, you know, LeBron James, his name is LeBron. Bron means brown, so, and Le means the, so that means the brown. So his name is the Brown. LeBron James' name means the Brown. The Brown James. And James means Jacobus, or would you say Yakub? Alright, and back to the MS Roll 1066, just to wrap this on up. And you want to go ahead and see the other kings from Wessex. Who fits the same description. Alright, so bear with me on this page because it's a lot. And this membrane 10, this is supposed to be for Edward the Elder, all the way to Ethel the Unready. Let's see, who is this? This is Edred. Try to open up more so you can see it. Okay. Alright, yep, so this is, like I said, this is Edrich. Good night, idyllic is his complexion. Why is it not allowing me to go all the way up? I'm not sure. Just gotta scroll. See, and sometimes because of the nature of these sites, how large the files are is it's hard to see. I'm just trying to give you an idea of some of them because I think that they took a lot of the paint off a lot of the skin tone, so it's hard to see. But use your imagination, you can kind of fill it in and see. This is King Ethelstan. As you see, this is Ethelstan. Yeah, you see, definitely like melanated people. Yep, King Ethelstan. It's a brother, known as they say the first king of England, but I always want to say give that to King Alfred the Great. But if we're gonna go off the records, that's what they're saying. King Ethelstan was technically the first king of England. But yeah, like I said, so look at him. This is King Ethelstan. So this is like 925, something like that, 925, 26, or 927 if I'm not mistaken. And then I'm going to show you, which I had the video of William the Conqueror, because he is 1066. So we have the 900, or yeah, the year 926, 27. And then we have William the Conqueror, 1066. Oh, that's not William the Conqueror. My bad. This is him right here. That's not him. That's King. This right here is King Edward the Confessor, as you can see. Melanated brother too. It's King Edward the Confessor. This right here is, if I'm mistaken, this Harold Bluetooth. Or excuse me, Harold Godwinson. My bad. This is Harold Godwinson. And Harold Godwinson was the king before the Battle of Hastings, which the Battle of Hastings was for, which brought in William the Conqueror, who was right to the right here. So you have to the left, this is King Ethelstan. See, dark-skinned brother, Ethelstan. Then right here, William the Conqueror. William the Conqueror. So you can kind of get an idea, brothers and sisters, of how they look. This is called the MS roll 1066. There you go, like I said, William the Conqueror. And this way you will get a better idea of your predecessors, how they look. So therefore you can kind of start seeing yourself within them. And then the last caveat is enigmatic, which is United States District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan. For those of you in the United States already know that the United States says that Supreme Court cases are considered supreme. What the United States Supreme Court says is technically based off of common law, so it's applicable in all of the so-called states or federal jurisdiction. All right, so it says, we're not going to read all into this. I'm just going straight to the meat. This is about, like I said, a brother named Ahmad Hassan who wanted to get citizenship as a free white person, but based off of the original law and the 1790 Naturalization Act, Arabs weren't considered a free white person underneath the law. And it was telling you how how to trace yourself to the group you come from is all done through genealogy. And why this is important is because we're letting you know, we're telling you we're Anglo-Saxon Berbers, aka Englishmen, English women from the Kingdom of England or territory we call Great Britain. And the only way for you to be able to do so, based off of what the Supreme Court says, it must be done through genealogy. So let's go and read. It says, to summarize the approach which must be followed in deciding whether a particular person applying for citizenship is a white person within a meaning of the statute, as interpreted by the Supreme Court, it is necessary to determine first the particular group or racial subdivision to which the individual belongs. In practical effect, proof of this matter is a matter of genealogy. It says an individual who presents an aberration, that means a difference from the color of skin of the group of which he is a member, such as such as light-skinned Chinese or Japanese, or a dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon. Here it is. So it says, so an individual presents an aberration from the color of the skin of the group which he is a member, such as a dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon, does not hereby acquire a different status under the act from other members of his group. Of course, when an individual applying for citizenship has a skin of a different color than is usual for the members of the group for which he claims to come, a strong burden of proof then rests upon him to show by the usual methods of proving genealogy that he is in fact a member of that group. So once again it says a strong proof of the usual methods of proving a genealogy is to show that you in fact are a member of that group. And in this case, if you're a dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon, you must do the same thing. So there you have it, brothers and sisters, from the work of Thomas William Shore. Here we go to his book, The Origin of the Anglo-Saxon Race, our Darker Forefathers, where he spoke in regards to the description of who they were, dark brown-skinned people, the Alpine race, aka Berbers, to showing you the proof through the Cheddar Man and the research that they have done with the DNA to corroborate not only he been dark or brown skinned, but the territory of the Iberian Peninsula, those folks were also the same complexion and technically tied to the same ethnicity. So showing you images of King Edward III from the Royal House of Plantagenet with his brown skin complexion, forked beard, to his son, Edward the Black Prince, showing you the same description as his father, all the way showing you back to King Ethelstan, who was the progenitor of the Kingdom of England, and then the invader, aka the usurper, but who still maintained the rights and prerogatives of the English people, William the Conqueror. William the Conqueror. So, there you have it, brothers and sisters. This is doing the great work. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments down there below. Once again, for those of you who want to help assist doing this great work, just leave an email message. Also, for those who would like to donate, to contribute doing this work, because we don't have any other funding coming from any other sources besides, our own merits. You can donate to Cash App English Church. That is Cash App $ English Church. All of your contributions will not go unnoticed. We really appreciate it. The King really appreciate it. For those of you who need help with this great work regarding your genealogy work, we do offer that as well as a service to help you be able to put this information together. So therefore, not only you can understand it, but you can be able to teach it to your loved ones. So therefore, you can start getting your house in order. Because there's more to come with this information. I have to first give you the ability to see this is who you are, show you how you trace yourself back, what the law recognizes, and then also show you what law that you're supposed to be underneath to be able to help maintain and solidify your position as being who your predecessors were. And that's understanding the common law of England. The common law of England, we know, have the Mosaic Code, the 10 laws of Moses, as well as the Christian Code of Ethics incorporated into it, which everyone who has descendants and successors must know, must live by, must recognize, for you to be able to truly be a descendant of those who you say that you come from. So with that being said, I love you. Stay tuned for future videos and lessons to come. And other than that, take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones, take care of the planet.